They say a single moment can change your entire life. For 18-year-old Nia Harper, that moment came one afternoon at a bustling H&M store in downtown Atlanta. She was only there to buy a last-minute graduation outfit. Instead, she ended up thrown out by an off-duty cop who saw her skin color before he saw her receipt. Humiliated and furious, Nia had no idea how she'd face her family, especially her mother, who happened to be one of the most formidable legal minds in the country. But as destiny would have it, the cop would soon discover he'd messed with the wrong girl. It was a scorchingly hot June afternoon in Atlanta, the kind where sweat beads appear on your forehead before you've even left the house. But for Nia Harper, it was a day brimming with excitement. She had graduated from high school just a few days earlier, and her plans were to celebrate with friends and family throughout the weekend. In the midst of this celebratory whirlwind, Nia realized she still hadn't found the perfect outfit for her family's formal dinner at the Ritz-Carlton, a celebratory meal meant to honor her big academic leap and her mother's latest professional achievement. Nia's mother was no ordinary mom. Justice Elaine Harper was the newest appointee to the Supreme Court of the United States, someone who had climbed from humble beginnings in an underfunded district of Detroit to the pinnacle of American jurisprudence. Everyone in the country seemed to know her name. The national spotlight had never entirely dimmed from the Harpers ever since Elaine's appointment was announced, making it both a source of pride and intense scrutiny for the entire family. Nia, however, had grown skilled at maintaining her cool in the public eye. She was a vivacious teenager, tall, athletic, academically driven, and socially warm. Though she could navigate interviews and camera crews, she still felt like any other kid wanting a normal life at times. This day was supposed to be a slice of normal. Slip into a favorite store, hunt for a cute outfit, and maybe grab a late lunch with her best friend Carla. Yet destiny had other plans. That afternoon, downtown Atlanta was abuzz with activity tourists flooding the area, locals rushing by, street performers singing for tips, and honking cars jammed in traffic. Despite the heat, Nia felt a spark of excitement. She pushed her braided hair off her shoulders, stepped into the massive H&M near Peachtree Street, and prepared to lose herself in the racks of clothes, scanning for that perfect dress. At first, Nia didn't notice the presence of an off-duty police officer stationed at the front of the store. He wasn't wearing the typical security uniform. Instead, he was clad in a neat polo shirt that bore the Atlanta Police Department insignia discreetly on the sleeve. Officer Martin Grissom was working a part-time security detail for extra cash, something a lot of police did. He stood near the entrance, arms folded, eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. Grissom had been with the force for over a decade, but he had a reputation for being quick to judge, and even quicker to assume the worst about people, especially people he decided looked suspicious. Tall, muscular, and imbued with the self-importance that often comes from wielding both a gun and a badge. He watched as customers flowed in and out of the store, occasionally nodding at the manager or giving short warnings to rowdy teenagers. From the moment Nia walked in, there was a flicker in Grissom's eyes. She was young, alone, and wearing a well-worn pair of sneakers and jean shorts. Unbeknownst to him, Nia was from an affluent background, but to Grissom, she was just another black kid, possibly up to no good. As she meandered through the racks, checking price tags, grabbing a couple of clothing items, Grissom's suspicion inexplicably magnified. The store was somewhat disorganized. It was a typical busy day, and clothes were scattered on racks and floors. Nia was methodical in her search, too methodical for Grissom's liking. He kept an eye on her every move, ignoring other shoppers who were also sifting through the same clothing racks. Nia felt a strange prickling at the back of her neck as she roamed the aisles. Like many young Black Americans, she was trained from an early age to sense when someone was watching, especially in certain public spaces. She glanced around and, sure enough, noticed the tall man in a polo shirt staring from a distance. She didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was looking for a lost child. or scanning for suspicious activity in general, but the feeling persisted. Each time she moved to a different rack, she'd catch him in her peripheral vision, lingering, staring, arms still folded in that rigid stance. Anxiety grew in her stomach. She told herself she had nothing to hide. She had her wallet, her credit card, and an ID if anyone even dared to question whether she was old enough to shop alone. Plus, she had never stolen so much as a lollipop in her life. Still, it felt oppressive. Something about being constantly watched made her breathing shallow and her heart pound a little faster. She wondered if she should leave, but she was determined not to let fear ruin her plans. This was supposed to be a normal day, a day of shopping, not a day of confrontation. Naya eventually found a sleeveless navy dress that flattered her slender frame. She also picked a second outfit, a pair of sleek trousers and a matching jacket, thinking it could be useful for future internships or events. With her items in hand, she made her way to the fitting rooms. She tried on her selections, snapping mirror selfies to send to Carla, who was stuck in traffic and hadn't arrived yet. Deciding the navy dress was perfect, she put the other outfit back on the return rack in front of the dressing room. Outside, Officer Grissom watched every step. He noticed she walked in with 2 pieces of clothing, but came out holding only one. A man with a paranoid mind. He instantly assumed the worst, that she had stuffed the second outfit into her bag, or even under her clothes. Naya was oblivious to his thoughts as she stood in line at the cash register, patiently waiting for her turn. She quickly texted Carla, "1 more minute. Promise. Gonna check out and meet you outside." She was about to put her phone away when she saw Grissom approaching in her peripheral vision. "Hey, miss, mind if I see your receipt for that item?" Grissom's voice boomed from behind her, unsettling both Naya and the cashier, who blinked in confusion. Naya turned around, eyebrows knitted. "I haven't even paid for it yet. I'm waiting in line." He pressed on without blinking. "Where's the other item you took into the changing room? The other outfit?" "I put it back on the rack inside the fitting room," Naya replied, trying to keep calm, but she could feel her heart rate spike. The cashier looked at them both, unsure how to proceed. There was a faint hush around the registers, as some customers paused their own transactions, curious about the tense exchange. "I didn't see you put anything back," Grissom insisted, stepping closer, intruding on her personal space. "Let me see your bag." Naya's cheeks grew warm with anger. "Excuse me? You want to check my bag without any reason? Don't give me that attitude. I saw you. You walked into the fitting room with 2 items and came out with 1. I just told you," Naya said through gritted teeth. "I left the second outfit on the return rack in the fitting area. You can ask the fitting room attendant." Grissom's cold stare suggested he had zero intention of verifying her story. He just wanted to establish dominance. "Show me your bag now," he repeated, voice simmering with hostility. Naya hesitated, glancing at the cashier, who looked away awkwardly. She opened her small crossbody purse, revealing only her phone charger, a lip gloss, and her wallet. Grissom rifled through it quickly, then handed it back with a sneer, as if disappointed not to find any stolen items. "Must have hidden it under your clothes," he muttered, then raised his voice. "I'm going to have to ask you to step out of line." Naya, incensed, clenched her fists. "I didn't steal anything. You have no right to kick me out just because you're suspicious." "I was about to pay." Grissom pointed toward the door. "I don't care who you are. Get out of the store, now." In the swirl of adrenaline and fear, Naya felt a rush of shame. She looked around at the silent onlookers. Half of them seemed embarrassed to witness the scene. The other half stared at her, as though they suspected she might indeed have done something wrong. Unable to contain her frustration, Naya spoke through tears. "I did nothing wrong. You're doing this because I'm black. This is racial profiling. You." Before she could finish, Grissom grabbed her by the arm. "I said out," he barked, using more force than necessary. Gasps erupted from the small crowd. Naya's arm twisted painfully as he marched her to the exit. She shot one last furious look around, and their eyes met those of a stunned store manager, a wiry woman, who seemed uncertain whether to intervene. Ultimately, the manager turned away, leaving Naya to fend for herself. Grissom practically shoved her out the door and onto the busy sidewalk. "Get lost," he hissed. Then he turned back, disappearing behind the glass doors of the store, as if the matter was done and dusted. Naya stood there, breathing heavily, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She felt the urge to scream, to rush back in and prove her innocence, but she also realized it might escalate the situation in front of passers-by. Just then, she heard a familiar voice call out, "Naya?" She turned to see her best friend Carla sliding out of a rideshare car, a concerned look on her face. Carla was a petite Latina, with curly hair and an upbeat spirit. Typically, she was the comedic relief in every tense situation. But this time, she looked alarmed. "Naya, what happened?" Naya took one look at Carla and broke down, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The cop. He accused me of stealing, Carla. He dragged me out of the store." Carla's eyes widened and her expression turned fierce in a heartbeat. "Oh my God. Are you hurt?" Naya rubbed her throbbing arm. "Just a little sore. It's not that. I'm more furious than anything else. He humiliated me in there for no reason. I had nothing in my bag. I was literally about to pay." Carla's hand shook as she fished out her phone. "We should film something. We should go back in there. This is unacceptable." Naya's mind spun. She wanted justice, but also dreaded an immediate confrontation that could lead to more violence or even an arrest for disturbing the peace. She'd seen enough viral videos to know how unpredictably these situations could explode, especially when race was involved and an officer was triggered. "I want to handle this carefully," she said, voice trembling. "He needs to face consequences, but I don't want to get arrested or worse." Carla took a deep breath. "Okay, let's be smart about it. Let's call your mom." At the mention of her mother, Naya stiffened. For a split second, she felt like that little girl who used to run crying to her mother after being bullied on the playground. But she also knew that her mother, as a newly minted Supreme Court justice, had sworn to uphold justice and the rule of law. If there was ever a time to rely on her mother's wisdom and authority, it was now. Still, a flicker of doubt crossed Naya's mind. She hated the idea that people might say she was using her mom's position to get out of trouble. But this wasn't trivial trouble. This was a serious violation of her civil rights. Her mother had always taught her that injustice left unaddressed could fester and grow. Naya glanced at Carla, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You have to," Carla urged. "He hurt you. He humiliated you. Don't let him get away with it." Heart hammering, Naya pulled out her phone and dialed. Justice Elaine Harper was in her chambers at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, building in downtown Atlanta that afternoon. Though she was officially on the Supreme Court, she was temporarily in Atlanta to wrap up a few personal commitments before relocating permanently to Washington, D.C. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, sweetie, how's the shopping spree going?" Naya swallowed, feeling tears threaten again. "Mom, something happened." The gentle warmth in Elaine's voice immediately turned to concern. "What's wrong?" Naya took a shaky breath. "I was at H&M looking for an outfit. An off-duty cop working security thought I was stealing. He forced me out, grabbed my arm. Mom, he wouldn't believe me. He basically profiled me." For several seconds, there was only silence on the line. When Elaine spoke again, her voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of carefully contained outrage. "Are you safe? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm okay," Naya said quickly, not wanting to worry her mother more than necessary. "He twisted my arm and shoved me outside, but I'm not seriously hurt. I'm so humiliated." Elaine took a measured breath. "I'm coming there. Don't go anywhere. I'll meet you out front." Naya lowered her phone, relief and anxiety mixing in her chest. She looked at Carla. "She's on her way." Carla nodded. "Good. This should be interesting." Elaine Harper arrived in less than 15 minutes. her black sedan pulling up to the curb with her driver, Robert, a composed man who'd served her family for years. Even though she insisted on being down to earth, certain formalities came with her new position, and having a driver was one of them. Dressed in a sleek navy pantsuit, Elaine stepped out of the car, her braided hair pinned back in a professional style. Naya felt her eyes welling up again, a mixture of relief and shame. Before today, she had never truly needed her mother's professional clout to defend her. She'd always tried to stay low-key, to earn her own achievements without leaning on the daughter of a prominent judge label. But now, she was desperate for someone to set things right. Elaine embraced her tightly, pressing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Then she gently cupped Naya's chin, examining her face. "You sure you're okay physically?" Naya nodded, tears glistening. "Yeah, I'm fine. I can't believe this happened." Elaine turned to Carla with a polite nod. "Carla, thank you for staying with her." Carla muttered, something about not leaving Naya alone with that maniac inside. Glancing at the store doors, Elaine's jaw tightened. "Where's this officer now?" Naya motioned at the glass entrance. "Inside, I guess." Elaine squared her shoulders. "Let's go." The three of them stepped back into the store together. At the sight of Naya's return, Officer Grissom stiffened from his position near the cashier counters. He watched Elaine approach with an imposing sense of purpose. He didn't know who she was yet, but the set of her jaw and the calm fury in her eyes unnerved him. The store manager, the wiry woman from before, approached hesitantly, wringing her hands. "Is everything all right?" she asked, though she knew very well it wasn't. Elaine took a measured breath. "Certainly not. I'm here because my daughter was harassed and forcefully removed by your security." The manager cast an anxious glance at Grissom, then at Naya, who stood behind her mother. The officer said she was suspected of shoplifting. He asked her to leave. Elaine's gaze hardened. "Did anyone verify if she actually stole anything?" The manager offered a helpless shrug. He insisted he saw something suspicious. Grissom marched forward, chest puffed out. "Ma'am, I was doing my job." She took 2 items into the fitting room and came out with 1. She refused to cooperate. Naya's face flamed with anger. "I did cooperate. You searched my bag. You found nothing." Elaine locked eyes with Grissom. "Are you aware that forcibly removing a customer without verifying your suspicion is not only a violation of store policy, but also potentially a civil rights violation?" Grissom snorted dismissively. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you can't barge in here, accusing me of violating anything. I'm a police officer." She was resisting, and I removed her for the safety of other customers. Elaine maintained her composure, though a muscle in her jaw twitched. "Resisting what? Trying to pay for her purchase?" "Step aside, officer." When Grissom refused to move, Elaine raised her voice just enough for the surrounding employees and customers to hear clearly. "I'm Justice Elaine Harper, USS Supreme Court. If you doubt me, look it up. And you, officer, are on very thin ice legally right now." The name Justice Harper sent a ripple of recognition through a few employees who watched the news regularly. The store manager's face drained of color. Grissom, on the other hand, froze in astonishment, a flicker of panic crossing his features. Yet his pride wouldn't let him fully back down. Suddenly, the hush that fell upon the store felt suffocating. A few onlookers began filming on their phones. Justice Elaine Harper was more than a household name. She was a symbol of justice. Grissom swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the precarious situation he'd placed himself in. Naya took a step forward, tears still shining in her eyes. "You humiliated me in front of everyone," she said, her voice trembling. "All because you assumed I was a criminal." Grissom opened his mouth to argue, but only managed a garbled response. I had probable cause. You fit the description of." Elaine cut him off sharply. "Don't even finish that sentence. Unless you can prove there was a legitimate theft, your actions were unfounded. Furthermore, you laid hands on my daughter without proper cause." The manager tried to intervene with a shaky voice. "Officer Grissom, maybe we should talk in private," but Elaine wasn't having it. "No, we will not brush this under the rug with a private chat. My daughter's rights were violated publicly, and I intend to see that addressed." Grissom's bravado wavered. He glanced at the phones recording him. He recognized that any misstep now could go viral. He could lose his job, or at least face an internal affairs investigation. "Look, Miss Harper, it's Justice Harper," Elaine corrected, her tones slicing through the air. "You've made a grave mistake, and we are going to rectify it. Manager, I expect you to retrieve security footage immediately. I also want to speak to the store's general manager or corporate representative." The manager bobbed her head nervously. "Yes, of course. Let me make some calls." With that, Elaine turned to Naya, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "We're not leaving until we get an apology and a full review of what happened. And if this officer can't produce any evidence of theft, I expect your corporate office to handle this swiftly. Otherwise, you'll be dealing with more than a lawsuit. You'll be dealing with a massive public relations nightmare." In the next half hour, the small store turned into a flurry of corporate phone calls, half-hushed conversations, and uneasy stares. The store manager, Brenda Carmichael, got on the line with her district supervisor, who in turn escalated it to a regional manager. Word traveled fast that a U.S. Supreme Court justice was on site, alleging racial profiling. Officer Grissom tried to lurk in the background, doing his best to appear unruffled, but the sweat staining the collar of his polo shirt betrayed his nerves. Carla discreetly filmed snippets, capturing the tension for posterity. Meanwhile, Naya sat in a chair near the fitting rooms, nursing her throbbing arm. Elaine remained standing, arms crossed, conferring occasionally with the store staff. Eventually, a harried middle-aged man in a suit rushed into the store. He introduced himself as Jonathan Baines, the regional director for H&M. His expression was a mask of forced politeness as he shook Elaine's hand. "Justice Harper, the first sincerely apologize for any distress this incident has caused your family. We are gathering all the necessary information." Elaine nodded. "I hope you understand the gravity of this situation, Mr. Baines. My daughter has been publicly humiliated, physically harmed, and racially profiled by an employee of this store." Baines's gaze flicked to Officer Grissom. "I'd like to review the security tapes as soon as possible. Manager Carmichael is pulling them now." 15 minutes later, they stood in a small back office, crammed around a computer screen displaying security footage. There was no audio, but the footage was clear. They saw Naya enter the store, rummage through the racks, pick 2 outfits, and head to the fitting room. Minutes later, she emerged with one item, exactly as she'd stated, and placed the other item on a return rack near the fitting rooms. The camera angle even captured the moment. An employee collected that outfit moments later. They then watched Grissom approach her at the register, rummage through her bag, and forcibly escort her out. The footage left little room for doubt. Elaine's expression never changed. She watched silently, arms folded across her chest, tension evident in the tightness of her jaw. When the video ended, she turned to Baines. "This is incontrovertible proof that my daughter did nothing wrong, and was, in fact, telling the truth every step of the way." Baines swallowed. "It certainly appears so. There was no attempt to steal anything." Elaine looked pointedly at Grissom, who stared at the floor. "Officer, do you have anything to say for yourself now that the evidence is clear?" Grissom cleared his throat. "I believed. I had a valid suspicion. Mistakes happen. Mistakes happen when there's real reason to suspect wrongdoing." Elaine cut in. "Not when an off-duty officer singles out a young black woman simply because she looked suspicious to him. This is unacceptable." At this, Baines stepped forward. "Justice Harper, on behalf of H&M, I extend our deepest apologies. We absolutely do not condone profiling of any kind. We value our diverse customer base. I'm prepared to offer a full apology, compensation for any medical bills or damages your daughter incurred, And we will also launch an investigation into Officer Grissom's conduct here today. For Naya, watching the footage was both validating and painful. She felt vindicated there was proof she had done nothing wrong, but it also stirred anger and humiliation anew. She relived the moment of being manhandled out the door, the judgment in customers' eyes. She felt her mother's hand on her shoulder, a silent show of support. Though a swirl of emotions brewed inside her, she mostly felt relief that the truth was undeniable. She noticed Carla discreetly wiping a tear from her own cheek. In the corner of the cramped office, Justice Elaine Harper inhaled deeply, controlling her voice. "I appreciate the immediate steps, Mr. Baines, but we're not done here. This officer acted with blatant disregard for my daughter's rights. We'll be filing a complaint with the Atlanta Police Department's internal affairs. We'll also weigh our legal options regarding the store's hiring practices for security personnel. This can't just be dismissed with a sorry." Grissom fidgeted, running a hand over his short, cropped hair. "I was doing my job," he repeated, but his voice sounded hollow, lacking conviction. In the presence of Elaine, Naya, Carla, and the store manager, Baines offered a formal apology on camera and action. Elaine insisted upon, for the sake of transparency. "We at H&M sincerely regret the incident that took place today, involving Miss Naya Harper," Baines said, eyes darting to the lens of Carla's phone camera. "Our investigation has concluded that Miss Harper did nothing wrong, and she was unfairly targeted and mistreated. We take such matters very seriously. We will be revising our security protocols and training to ensure that customers of all backgrounds feel safe and respected in our stores." His words were rehearsed, but they held a certain gravity. H&M, after a string of past controversies, was wary of social media backlash, especially involving racial discrimination. Elaine nodded curtly when he finished. Grissom stood off to the side, arms crossed defensively. He couldn't bring himself to apologize. Or perhaps he couldn't manage the humiliation of apologizing in front of a camera. As the tension escalated, a memory flashed through Naya's mind, stories her mother had told her about growing up in Detroit. Elaine often recounted tales of discrimination and profiling, of how teachers assumed she'd fail, how shop owners would watch her with hawk-like suspicion, and how she swore to fight it, not only for herself, but for all those who came after. Now, here stood Elaine, a Supreme Court justice, forced to relive those indignities through her daughter. Naya felt a pang of guilt for having dismissed some of her mother's cautionary words as overprotective. She finally understood that these injustices weren't relics of a distant era. They were alive and well, needing to be confronted head-on. While still in the back office, Elaine's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and answered. It was Police Chief Rodriguez from the Atlanta PD. Word had reached him that a Supreme Court justice's daughter had a run-in with one of his officers. "Justice Harper, good afternoon. I've been informed there was some unfortunate incident in a clothing store downtown." Elaine's voice was crisp. "Yes, Chief Rodriguez. That's putting it mildly. One of your officers, working off-duty security, forcibly removed my daughter from the premises after accusing her of shoplifting. The store security footage exonerates her completely. She was targeted based on nothing but his suspicion, and, quite plainly, her race." Chief Rodriguez sighed audibly. "I'm sorry to hear that. I assure you, the Atlanta Police Department does not condone racial profiling. We will launch a thorough investigation into Officer Grissom's actions. If found guilty of misconduct, he will face disciplinary measures up to and including termination." Elaine nodded silently, letting the tension in her posture speak volumes. After a few more exchanges, she ended the call, her face resolute. "The chief is aware, and you can expect an internal affairs review," she told Grissom, who stiffened visibly. News travels fast in the digital age. A few customers who had witnessed the incident posted about it on social media, tagging Naya's name once they realized she was Justice Elaine Harper's daughter. Local activists and social justice advocates began to rally online, outraged by the blatant example of racial profiling. Within an hour, a small group of protesters gathered outside the store, holding signs and chanting slogans against racial discrimination. The press caught wind, and soon camera crews showed up, eager for statements. Elaine maintained a calm yet firm demeanor, telling reporters that she wouldn't rest until accountability was served. Amid the chaos, Elaine asked to speak with Grissom privately. The store's cramped staff lounge provided a small measure of privacy. He stood near the doorway, arms folded, trying to project confidence. Elaine leveled her gaze at him. "Officer Grissom, I want to hear it directly from you. Why did you stop and search my daughter?" He bristled, glancing at the door as if looking for an escape route. "As I said, she went into the fitting room with 2 items and came out with 1. I had cause." "Let's not repeat the same line," Elaine interrupted. "You've seen the footage. You know how baseless your suspicions were." Grissom's shoulders slumped slightly. "Look, I've been a cop for over 10 years. I've seen all sorts of tactics, theft rings. People come in, they slip items under their clothes. They leave behind an empty hanger." Elaine's voice hardened. "But you didn't see that. You saw her skin color, you saw her youth, and you presumed guilt. Don't hide behind experience. Own up to your bias." A flicker of defensiveness crossed his face. "I'm not racist. I'm just cautious." Elaine's lips thinned. "I've heard that excuse before. It's the same excuse used to justify countless injustices. If you really believe you're not racist, then you need to confront the fact that your so-called caution led you to assault and humiliate an innocent young woman. My daughter." He opened his mouth, then shut it, struggling to find the right words. The weight of her accusation pressed on him like a tangible force. "You might have gotten away with it if she wasn't my daughter," Elaine said softly, a note of sadness in her voice. "Imagine how many times you've done this to young people who don't have anyone to back them up, or who don't have the power of a national platform to shed light on the incident." Grissom swallowed hard, suddenly looking older and more tired than he had moments ago. Elaine placed a business card on a small table. "That's my office line in Washington. You want to apologize properly, you can reach me there. But right now, officer, you have to face the consequences of your actions." With that, she walked out, leaving him standing in the empty lounge with trembling fingers. Outside, the store had become a media circus, a cluster of reporters jockeying for position. Naya, Carla, and Elaine remained inside for the moment, seeking a bit of refuge from the cameras. The store manager, corporate officials, and public relations representatives all tried to contain the situation. They issued official statements, insisted that this does not represent our values, and tried to appease the outraged community. Elaine was fully aware that any statement she made could be dissected, sensationalized, or twisted by the media. She carefully weighed her words when she finally stepped outside to address the press. "My daughter came here for a simple shopping trip," she began, voice resonating clearly. "She was accused of shoplifting without cause and forcibly removed from the store by an off-duty police officer. This is unacceptable, not just because she's my daughter, but because it could happen to anyone." Flashbulbs exploded, microphones were thrust forward. Elaine continued, calm but unyielding. "Let this be a reminder. Racial profiling is still a pervasive issue in our society, and it requires all of us, law enforcement agencies, corporations, and individual citizens, to stand against it. I trust the Atlanta Police Department will conduct a proper investigation, and I appreciate H&M's swift response. But we must demand systemic change, so no one else endures what my daughter endured today." Support poured in from civil rights organizations, local leaders, and social media influencers who championed racial equality. Hashtags calling for a boycott of the store and accountability for the officer began trending regionally. Dozens of people shared personal stories of discrimination, shining a floodlight on the broader issue. However, there was also backlash from certain corners. A few internet commentators and talking heads on certain cable news networks argued that Elaine was wielding her power as a Supreme Court justice to bully a police officer. They questioned whether Naya had provoked the officer, or if Elaine was capitalizing on her status to bring undue scrutiny on a simple misunderstanding. Elaine and Naya tried not to let these narratives sour their determination. The truth was on their side, backed by video evidence, and while Elaine recognized the existence of negative spin, she refused to back down. Days later, the Atlanta Police Department held a press conference. Chief Rodriguez stood at the podium, accompanied by members of his leadership team. After a thorough review of the incident at H&M involving Officer Martin Grissom, it is the finding of our Internal Affairs Unit that Officer Grissom violated department policy by using excessive force and engaging in discriminatory conduct. We apologize to Miss Harper and Justice Harper for this egregious lapse in judgment. The department is committed to fair and impartial policing for all citizens. He then announced that Grissom was placed on administrative leave, pending further disciplinary measures, which could include termination. The press swarmed Elaine for a statement, but she offered a brief response. I appreciate the Atlanta Police Department's swift investigation. This, however, is just one step in addressing a larger societal issue. I hope Officer Grissom and anyone who has engaged in such profiling reflects deeply on the harm they've caused. Naya found herself on the receiving end of countless messages, some from strangers who supported her, others from classmates and acquaintances, and even from people she'd never met who shared their own experiences of profiling. She was touched by the outpouring of compassion, yet disturbed by how common her story was. Carla, who had been filming parts of the ordeal, started a social media series titled #NotJustNaya, where people could submit stories of racial bias and profiling. Within a week, the page exploded with thousands of posts and videos. Amid all the external commotion, Naya had to process her own trauma and anger. She was grateful she hadn't been seriously hurt, but she struggled with a sense of violation. Nothing felt quite the same when she walked into a store or strolled down a sidewalk. She felt eyes on her everywhere. She confided in her mother one evening, I hate feeling like a victim, Mom. I hate it. Elaine gently held her hand. You're not a victim, Naya. You're a survivor of an injustice. That distinction matters. What happened to you was wrong, but you fought back. You used your voice. And you're changing the conversation. 2 weeks after the incident, a small envelope arrived at Elaine's office. Inside was a handwritten note. Justice Harper, I'm writing this because I owe you and your daughter an apology. I realize my actions were driven by assumptions and fear, rather than facts. I won't make excuses. I crossed a line I never should have crossed. I accept any and all consequences from the department. I truly regret what I did to Naya. Martin Grissom. Elaine read the note twice. Her emotions conflicted. She showed it to Naya, who stared at it silently. Do you think it's sincere? Naya asked finally. Elaine sighed. It might be, but sincerity alone doesn't erase what he did. Still, an apology is a step in the right direction. Naya nodded, folding the note carefully. I guess it's good that he realized what he did was wrong. Maybe he can change. Maybe. Officer Grissom's administrative hearing did not go in his favor. Faced with mounting evidence, security footage, witness testimonies, and a rising tide of public backlash, the Atlanta PD decided to terminate his employment. In a public statement, Chief Rodriguez reiterated the department's zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. Grissom's personal life also unraveled. His wife's brother was a civil rights advocate who publicly denounced Grissom's actions, causing a rift in their family. Without the stability of his job, Grissom faced financial difficulties. The bills piled up, and though he tried to secure work as a security guard elsewhere, no reputable store was willing to hire someone with that kind of high-profile incident attached to his name. The ultimate irony was that his downfall came from the same store security camera he relied on to confirm his suspicions. A single moment of bias cost him his career, his standing in the community, and his sense of identity as a law enforcement officer. Naya's story catalyzed deeper conversations. Schools invited her to speak about racial profiling. Universities in Atlanta hosted panel discussions on systemic bias in law enforcement. Elaine also received requests to give keynote addresses on civil rights, which she accepted, weaving her daughter's experience into a broader legal context. The hashtag not just Naya continued to trend for weeks, drawing attention to discriminatory incidents nationwide. The conversation, once sparked, refused to die. Gradually, Naya began to heal. She focused on her summer internship at a local nonprofit that helped underprivileged students prepare for college. She found purpose in channeling her anger into activism and empathy. She even forgave, in her own way, the man who had wronged her, though she never forgot the lesson. Oddly enough, about a month after the incident, Carla convinced Naya to return to that very H&M. "We're not letting that man's actions keep you from living your life," Carla insisted. "You can't let fear or bad memories win." Stepping through the glass doors, Naya's heart pounded briefly. The store had undergone some changes: new staff, new layouts, more cameras, ironically, though she guessed they were better trained now. The manager who'd been on duty that fateful day had transferred, replaced by a younger black woman named Tasha, who greeted them warmly. Recognizing Naya's face, Tasha offered an immediate apology for what had happened weeks earlier. Naya accepted it graciously. She felt a weird sense of closure. She and Carla browsed the store without incident, eventually purchasing matching graphic tees. It was a small act, but a symbolic one. That evening, Naya's family finally held the celebratory dinner at the Ritz-Carlton. They'd planned weeks ago, both for Naya's graduation and Elaine's seat on the Supreme Court. The original event had been overshadowed by the drama at H&M, but now they were determined to reclaim their joy. Her extended family attended, along with a few close friends. Carla was there too, of course. They toasted to Naya's future at Howard University, where she'd been accepted to study political science, a field she was now even more committed to, having seen firsthand how much justice matters. During her speech, Elaine raised her glass. "To my daughter, who showed me courage isn't confined to courtrooms or legal briefs, it flourishes anywhere. Someone stands up for what's right." A chorus of "Hear, hear," echoed in the elegantly appointed banquet room. Naya, dabbing her eyes, realized that though the experience had been harrowing, it had sharpened her resolve to fight for equality, just like her mother. In the weeks and months that followed, the incident settled into public memory as yet another example of racial profiling gone horribly wrong, but this time with a high-profile twist. The lawsuits and legal processes would grind on, with H&M's legal team negotiating settlements and the city bracing for civil proceedings against the Atlanta PD. Elaine made it clear that, while they might settle certain legal claims, the bigger battle, systemic change, was far from over. Naya continued to speak at youth forums and social justice panels, emerging from her mother's shadow as a formidable voice in her own right. She carried herself with more confidence, aware of the power of her voice, her story, and her lineage. For Grissom, the repercussions were heavy. Some might call it karma. Others might say it was simply a just outcome for his wrongdoing. Either way, he lost the privilege of wearing the badge, a potent reminder that when you abuse power, you risk losing it entirely. And so life moved on, but no one involved would ever forget the lesson etched into that afternoon in Atlanta. That injustice, once confronted, can be transformed into a beacon for change. It only takes a moment of courage, and sometimes the unwavering stance of a mother determined to protect her child, to ignite that transformation for everyone to see. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. Naya's story is a stark reminder that prejudice can strike anywhere, yet courage and unity can conquer it. Even in the face of humiliation and fear, Naya stood her ground. And Justice Elaine Harper showed how one person's resolve can shine a fierce light on wrongdoing. In the end, accountability was served, and a family's unwavering love prevailed over hate. If you found power in this story, please hit that like button and share it with your friends. By spreading awareness, you become part of the solution, helping us continue these conversations that lead to real change. And if you'd love more content like this, stories that tackle social injustice and highlight the triumph of the human spirit, don't forget to subscribe. Your support allows these narratives to reach more people, building a community committed to fairness and understanding. Thank you for watching.